You're listening to the Business Communicators, presented by IABC Houston. And now your hosts, Austin Stetton, Hattie Horn, and Thomas Bain.
Welcome to Season 3, Episode 17 of the Business Communicators, a podcast presented by IABC Houston. My name is Austin Stetton, joined alongside my co-hosts Hattie Horn and Thomas Bain on this journey as we explore the world of communications and discuss key issues and trends that impact our industry. And March Madness is here, guys. I am so excited. I've got my Baylor Bears pullover, hoodie, whatever you want to call it. Thomas has his Texas Tech Red Raiders gear. Hattie, I don't know what to tell you. Prairie View did not make the tournament.
That's okay. I'm not worried about that. What I do love is that at HBCU,
Texas Southern
is in the tournament. They play tonight, if I'm not mistaken, and they're projected to win.
Well, here's the crazy part. We are recording this episode on Friday, so March Madness tips off officially today. We hope by the time you're listening to this episode on Monday or next week that all of our teams have won and we don't look foolish wearing our school colors on.
Well, I'm wearing my school colors, but my school's not in the tournament. Let's be real clear about that.
Oh yeah, no,
sorry.
We're real clear about that. And if we're gonna talk about schools, I just have to throw out that my Baylor Bears played your Prairie View A&M this week in baseball, and Baylor came out on top.
Oh, they came out way on top, but you know what? That's just one game. That's okay. PV, they're known for making a comeback. They'll make a comeback.
It's interesting. We're sitting here talking sports because I was also going to mention today is the Big 12 season openers for baseball for most teams, and some college baseball starting off. So you have a lot of the preseasons going on. Who says Texas is only about football when we're sitting here talking about basketball? More teams from Texas in the tournament than any other ones. Big 12 or Texas baseball is in full swing, and then at some point in time, you have some football taking place as well. So
yeah, it's definitely an exciting time if you're a sports fan. I think what was challenging about the last year is we saw a lot of empty stadiums, and we'll talk more about this in a little bit, but we're starting to see, at least here in Texas, capacity limits actually increase. There's a lot of uncertainty on how many fans will come into the Astros, and I think the communications behind that is also kind of interesting to look at. But as a quick reminder, we do want to encourage you to follow us on social media. Just search @BizCommunicator, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, YouTube. All of the platforms, we're on there. You can also shoot us an email if you've got feedback, comments, questions, podcast@ibchouston.com. And you can visit our website, thebusinesscommunicators.com. And some exciting news, we actually launched a club on Clubhouse. So if you go to Clubhouse, if you're active on Clubhouse, search Business Communicators. We tried to put the Business Communicators, but there was a character limit, and the article V was too long. So we're going to be hosting some chats there. Occasionally each week, and, just some conversations. And I think it'll be a great way for us to, hear from our audience directly. So we'll drop a link to join the club on Clubhouse in the show notes below. So just check that out. But guys, I'm excited about this week. And one of the reasons why I'm excited is one of my favorite podcast episodes that we've done in season 3 has been with Chris Brogan. And this Thursday, all 3 of us are going to be hosting a webinar with Chris Brogan. And you can find out details about that through IBC. Just go to ibchouston.com. But I'm excited to have another conversation with Chris. Thomas, Hattie, how are you guys feeling about this?
Yeah,
I am as well. I don't know if we should do the warning now saying that we will be talking about marketing communications, or we'll be talking about whatever pops in our minds at the time. Life in general and being better humans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely. I love that, the connection with Chris. He's the real deal for me. And I like having conversations with him because it doesn't feel like it's an interview. It's just a regular conversation. So I'm really excited about him coming back and talking to IABC Houston. That's gonna be a good one, a real good one. So hey, join us.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, Chris Brogan is going to be joining IBC Houston for a webinar on Thursday, March 25th. It's free to register if you're an IBC member, and if not, it's $15. I think it's definitely well worth it. But the topic that we're going to be discussing is being authentic doesn't make you believable, and it's Real Talk with Chris Brogan. So it's going to be at noon Central Time, and something that we're really excited about. So we hope that you can join it. If you have questions ahead of time, definitely let us know what those questions are. We can throw those into the conversation. But this past week has been interesting, Thomas and Hattie, and we discussed last week on our LinkedIn page about our experience with the vaccine and how it had come 1 year after the country had essentially shut down. And last year at this time, we should have been full swing into March Madness. And obviously the tournament was canceled. And as we mentioned at the top of the show, March Madness is going on right now. I'm incredibly excited about it. I hope my Bears do well. I hope Thomas's Texas Tech Red Raiders do well. But it's a different time. And it's not going to be the same. There aren't going to be packed out arenas, sold out arenas. And it's interesting to see what these universities are doing to keep fans engaged through March Madness, what CBS, TBS, TNT, True TV, what they're doing to keep fans engaged, especially because such a big part of it is having, the bands there. It's having the fans there. It's having that crowd. And if you've never been to a NCAA basketball tournament game, it's incredible. I mean, just the atmosphere is unbelievable, knowing that your team could survive in advance or go home as an upset. I'm curious what your takes are on this, just from a communications perspective, from, a marketing perspective. 1 year later, after COVID-19, finally having the tournament back. I mean, what's your reaction to the whole situation, what we've gone through, and what we can anticipate for the tournament?
One of the things that I think about when it comes to March Madness is all the buildup. If you remember, there's always this great buildup with all of the ads and all the commercials and all the teams that have been involved in the energy, even from the ads themselves, that most folks, myself, I can only speak for myself, I'm not feeling as much, because whether it's my team or whether it's anybody else's team, and the folks that there's whose teams are going to be there, they can't be there. So it's very interesting to think about, how are these schools communicating to their folks? Hey, what are some of the mechanisms that you're going to do if your team's in the tournament that you're going to make available to us directly on campus, and not just through the channels that are, the streaming channels, TV, or what have you? What are some of those things that you're going to be doing? I know for myself, and this is not exactly sports, but it's about an event. When I was working with a company where we had some employees who couldn't be at the actual event, we created a mini event for them at the actual site so they could feel like they were there, because they couldn't stop working or anything like that. It's just like the students, if they can't be there, are they doing some sort of mini events? I'd be interested to hear what are those things that they're doing, those mechanisms to keep them folks engaged.
Yeah, I think so. I'm just focused on Baylor, obviously, because that's where I went, and those are the channels that I follow on, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and for the longest time, Baylor has had this sort of throwback logo, and it's I think it was done by the same cartoonist that did a lot of the Disney animations back in like the 1950s, and they call it Sailor Bear. And it's sort of this like vintage logo design. And a few years ago, the football team put it on the side of the helmets, and the fans just went absolutely nuts. It was so much hype. And then the basketball team, like a year later, had these Nike sweaters with Sailor Bear in like this neon electricity color. And the hype was just so incredible. I mean, it's something that Baylor fans absolutely love. And Baylor fans have never been able to get that Nike sweater. And they've been teasing it all season long. And to kind of build up the hype for March Madness, the coaching staff and some of the players started wearing that sweater. And they started posting about it on social media. And then on Tuesday night, the university released a special, I think they call it like the electricity or energy line or something like that. And that sweater dropped online. And it sold out within minutes. And it was just incredible for me to see a university kind of do that guerrilla marketing, and to see them almost take the same approach as like a Nike or an Adidas when it comes to like a big shoe drop and just all the hype around it. And I thought that was such a great way to get the fan base excited ahead of the tournament.
We talk about marketing sports and everything. It's a lot easier to market sports when your team's winning. I think if you look at like the Chicago Cubs and their bleacher seats daytime thing is just, people line up to go to the games, even though, well, up until a couple years ago, they hadn't even really made the playoffs for all those years. I'm grateful that sports is back and it's starting to feel more and more like normal because we've all been trapped in our homes. I was reading some of the viewership numbers for the different things, and I've always wondered about sports and how it connects us because of that water cooler talk when you're in the office and you're talking to your person. Hey, did you see the end of that game last night? Whether it was your team or not. Hey, did you see that top 10 play? And so I'm really happy for it. I do kind of feel for the fans because they're going to not be able to go. So I'm going to do a little humble brag here. I actually was at the Final Four, the last one, because Tech played Virginia for the final game, and I was up in Minneapolis for that. And Austin hit the nail on the head. Is if you go to a Final Four game, even if you are three rows from the top of a football stadium watching a basketball game, you feel the electricity. It's not you just hear it. It's just not everything like that. You literally feel it, and it's kind of like that feeling that you get when you go to a big college football game, not a pro football game, a college football game, where those bands start up and the run out and the crowd is just going crazy. So I'm excited. I don't think Tech's gonna win. I really don't. I think we're too Jekyll and Hyde-ish. Being a true fan, I'm actually able to sit there and watch it. Our 3-point defense from outside the perimeter is a little bit lacking. I think we do possibly have a decent team, a really good team for next year as we start to get more leadership in there.
Yeah, I think senior-heavy teams, especially what we've seen over the past few years, have tended to do well in March Madness. With Villanova, Virginia, those are very senior-heavy, and I think the maturity really helps you in a tournament situation. But that's just like everything else in life. I think it's the companies that have experience but also have the ability to be agile that are doing well over the past year. And Hattie, I thought Thomas mentioned something interesting about that water cooler talk. And I think that's been one of the challenges over the last year with COVID-19 is how do you engage like your employees when so much importance comes from those discussions, stopping by someone's desk, in the lobby when you're getting coffee, having lunch, chatting about life, what you did over the weekend. I think that's what draws a lot of people close, but how do you keep people engaged and not just hopping on Zoom and having conversations via Zoom chats each week?
Well, this is my thing. I don't know. I don't look at it as just the tool that you use to interact with somebody. I believe it's also the frequency. It's about the timing. And it's also about the message itself in terms of what do you want people to know? What do you want to talk about that that people, whether they're interested in it or whether it's something that you need them to do or whether it's quelling a rumor, providing facts that, dispel rumors and give people accurate information. So engagement, it's a big word. It's not what we are, it's what we do and it's who we are. So it's just like if I'm standing at the water cooler and I'm talking to Thomas about Texas Tech just lost something, which they probably will, but okay.
Fighting words.
I love me some Thomas. But the thing is, I'm talking about something that Thomas can relate to. I'm talking about something that he's interested in. So it's also about being relatable in your communications and your messaging. So it's not just how, if I'm at the water cooler, whether I'm doing it through a social channel or what have you. And I just noticed that even on social media, whether it's one sentence, and one of the people that I really love is Christy Teigen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's not just because she's a supermodel, and it's not, she always has something interesting to say. And she doesn't back down, and people are like rabid committed to see, okay, what did Christy say today? So that's what makes me keep coming back. And that's why I would want Thomas to keep coming back, because Hattie is going to tell me something that I want to know, that's interesting to me, that relates to me, that's relevant to my work, or that's relevant to the company, or relevant and is going to make me want to drive and take action around it.
It's interesting you say that, because when I'm consulting or talking to different companies, being a numbers guy, everybody's like, how do you gain
Wait, Thomas, you're a numbers guy?
Or how do you do the marketing? Yeah, I know. Shocking. We haven't talked about that like 4 times in a row. But, there's liars, damn liars, and statisticians. And, we've also talked about that before. But what I'm saying is everybody's like, well, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, I do lots of marketing to marketing, meaning that I'm making the rounds. I'm talking to the people before we have the big kickoff meeting or the big brand idea, building people along that journey, but then also talking about what it is they like. Hey, they run marathons. Hey, how's that marathon training coming? How are the wife and kids? How is Prairie View A&M doing? How is Baylor Bears' new football coach going? Etc. I don't want to talk basketball right now because it's just going to make Austin's head a little more inflated. So I'm going to try to pick on a different sport for him right now.
We see where you're going.
But Daddy, you hit the nail on the head.
It's what's in it for them. It's what's in it for me.
Exactly. And I heard a talk, I don't know if it was a regional IABC or it might have been a PRSA thing, where they were talking about how to win the awards. And the speaker was up there and he said, we're gonna go over a little bit about, what makes our campaign so good, but we're gonna talk about the thing we like the most. Us. And he just kind of rolled on with it. And I was like, that's actually true, is people like to relate, people like to talk about themselves. And so, to your point, Hattie, I'm 100% in agreement. Is build that bond, find something common, learn something new. I'm trying to learn Australians football right now because they actually opened up first game of the season last night, and they had 50,000 people there in Australia, and it was only half the stadium size. I'm like, whoa. So our Australian listeners, we're bonding with you here. So like us, smash that like button.
But I like that. And at the same time, Thomas, something that you've always said is like, be kind to people. And I had a conversation with Hattie last week. It was last Thursday. And, we were just catching up on how things are going. And one of the things that I love about talking with Hattie is, I don't feel like 15, 20 minutes is enough. And I think we were on the phone for like 35 minutes. And I had a meeting and I was like, Hattie, I got to drop up, but I'll call you back. So we were chatting for a good while. And one of the things that she said, and we actually shared this on our LinkedIn page on Thursday afternoon, was you can't talk about being kind to other people if you can't be kind to yourself. And that really resonated with me because I think mental health is something that's been so important throughout the last year, especially, as some people are, alone, working from home and they're not, able to interact with people. And then we've got some people that, are trying to balance work, kids. We have some people that are looking for jobs, and it's just it's incredibly tough. And that self-care is so important in just not only COVID-19 but beyond.
Well, there's something else. Let's add a little bit to that. Sometimes we may be working from home and working remote and being alone, but there are times we can go into the office and you could be sitting amongst a bunch of people and you're still alone. So whether you're surrounded by people or whether you're sitting in front of a computer in your own individual office, it's about, give yourself some grace. And as you are interacting with other people, make that a meaningful, thoughtful, intentional interaction, always. And that's where the empathy comes in. That's where the kindness comes in, because we don't give ourselves enough grace. And that's something that I do a lot. I got to give myself grace, because if I don't, I don't know where I'd be in this place right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, meet people where they are. I think that's incredibly important. Even if you're at Starbucks, for example, like earlier this week I was at Starbucks, and the barista, so there were 2 baristas there. One of the baristas, you could tell that she wasn't having a good day. It was just, kind of obvious by her mannerisms. And I was kind of thinking to myself, I wonder, like, what's going on? I wonder why, I wonder what happened today, that kind of made her in this situation, and you just don't know some of these stories. And then contrasting, I had the other barista, I guess, saw my sweatshirt and asked me a question about it. And then we ended up getting into a conversation, but that is the thing when it comes to like mental health and self-care, is you never know what the other person is going through. You know, even if they are projecting themselves as incredibly happy, like, or incredibly engaging, for example, like the barista who approached me about my sweater, you don't know what he's been through or what he's gone through. And so meet people where they are, be patient, be kind to people, but also take care of yourself. As Hattie said, you know, that's incredibly important.
I had a really, really good friend in college that was dating somebody, and went over to their house. And after that going over to their house, they said, we're not dating anymore. And I asked him why. And he said, they only have single ply toilet paper. And I was like, what? They're like, if they're not taking care of themselves and giving them the small pleasures in life, there's no way I'm going to be part of that long-term relationship. And I was like,
oh my God.
You're 21 years old. That's really profound, especially knowing you. But it's true. It is true. As he had that mentality is I want to be around people who are happy in their skin. I want to be around people who are going to take care of themselves for whatever reason and whatever twisted thing in his head was going on. But Austin, you mentioned it, and you know, we live in Houston. Drivers here are not the greatest, but that's probably true across every city in the United States and probably the world. And it reminds me of the story of sitting in traffic, and you see that car driving down the median, just blowing by everybody with hazard lights on. And so everybody's trying to cut them off. And then finally, the car pulls over on the side of the road, and the woman riding in the passenger seat goes into labor. You don't know what emergencies they're going through. So why are you trying to bring people to the same level as you are? You know, what do they say is, we talk about crisis communications and the social media and the deep fakes. We've talked about that as well. Is do you want to stoop to those levels who are trolling you? Because at the end of the day, everybody loses when you stoop to the lowest common level.
Very much true. I actually saw on TikTok this week, there was somebody who ordered like a calendar from like a paper company. And I guess they ordered the 12-month calendar in early January. And here we are like mid-March, and it still hasn't arrived. And so the person has been like trying to send in queries into this business asking like, what's going on? Why aren't you responding? Is there an update on the shipping? And apparently what happened was, I guess this company got some crazy media exposure in late December, early January, you know, for their cool creative calendars. And they just didn't have the capacity to turn out these calendars. They didn't have the supply. They didn't have the printing capability. And they were so overwhelmed with orders, but they didn't have the foresight to stop taking orders. And so as a result, they just got so far behind, stopped communicating. And so this person created like a TikTok account basically asking like what happened and explain their story. And I guess every time they had tried to approach this company on social media, they had been blocked. And the owner of the company decided to respond on the official company TikTok account. And she berated the customer, you know, saying, you don't know my situation. This is what happened. And then she doxed her, gave her first and last name. And it's like, I could have potentially had empathy for this company saying, look, we got overwhelmed. This is on us. We apologize. We'll give you a refund. But as companies in these situations, you've got to take like a humanistic approach, right? Like, just like Thomas said, you don't know what the situation is with somebody driving down the side of a road, you know, going 90 miles an hour. They could be going into the hospital. You have to try to meet people where they are. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, communicator, I mean, you can't just berate somebody for a situation. Explain the situation calmly. Don't try to point fingers at the end of the day. That's not going to win you any customers.
Or do like other businesses. There are other businesses that have put on their websites, on their social, at the top of their pages that say, due to COVID-19, there's going to be a delay in shipment. Or like the young lady who I bought something from, is it Etsy or Etsy?
Etsy, yeah.
Okay, you know I can.
Etsy.
Y'all know I can mangle a name. I digress. I bought something from this young lady. She immediately followed up with me and said, I am so sorry. I have a family emergency out of town. I'm not going to be able to get your order done until blah, 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 till I get back. Are you okay with that? And I was. I said, oh, yeah, sure. Thank you for telling me. And then once she got my order to me, she gave me extra stuff free.
That's
But
crazy.
that's called good customer service and being a smart business person. So the person who berated the person, or even the person who legitimately and had a valid point in asking, what's going on with the order, that business person did not, like you say, meet that person where they were and just say, hey, I am so sorry. We got overwhelmed with all of these things. She took it upon herself, and she may have lost other customers as a result. I'm pretty sure. I wouldn't purchase from her. You gonna cuss me out on a social media platform? Are you out of your mind?
Yeah. I think the post was actually flagged for bullying, which is just incredible. But like Hattie said, going that extra mile, being transparent and communicating with your customers and your employees
Yes.
helps build credibility. And Thomas, I know you're the numbers guy and we joke about it all the time, but I mean, metrics probably have to prove that openness and being transparent probably helps with morale. It probably helps with business growth. I would imagine. I mean, I don't have the data in front of me, but
I can talk the numbers, or I can talk voice customer, or I can talk voice of employee. I've done them all, customer journey. And there's a great book by Jay Baer called Hug Your Haters. And it talks about the explosion of social media, where you want to interact with the people who are making the comments, but you want to get it back to a channel. You want to meet your customers where they're talking about or where they're complaining, whether it's Twitter, Pinterest, TikTok, email, phone calls, who cares, snail mail. But you want to also get it back to a point to where you can effectively handle it. You don't want to just go silent there. You have those funny things about, like, I think it was United where they lost my guitar and the guy wrote a song about it, showing the guitar, like, going through it. And in today's world, you have to. There was a saying on Top Chef a couple years ago where it said, you go to the restaurant the first time for the food. You go back for the service. Meaning that you have one opportunity to make that impression and to make it feel like you're truly a guest. And in the B2C world, and even into the B2B world, they're guests. They're choosing to do business with you. Your customers are choosing to spend money with you. They're not doing it because they have to, unless your name's Google or Facebook. Sorry. And so you have to show that customer service there, and say, hey, this is what's going on. I worked for retail companies where there was a typo on our website where we sold things for a penny that were worth, $100, and we either had to do the I'm sorry, we made a mistake, here's a coupon, or we honored the price, and how quickly we caught it. And that's the right thing to do. That is really, really honestly the right thing to do. We're human. People understand that people make mistakes.
But people are not listening. People are not listening to understand. They're listening so they can respond. Mm-hmm. And the examples that you guys gave are those people that's how they communicate. They're listening. That lady, she just wanted to respond because she felt threatened or attacked or whatever as far as her company, even though it was a simple question. She wasn't listening to what that customer said to understand what that customer may be feeling or to relate to that customer. She was just listening so she could respond or block or whatever because that customer wasn't saying what she wanted them to say. Yeah.
What I was going to say is, on the number side of it is if a company makes a mistake, a restaurant, anything like that, you make a mistake, forget an order, ship something wrong, have a delay in the order, is if a company can rectify or give a solution that is acceptable and exceeds their expectations, your chances of converting that passive customer to a loyal customer is like 95%. It's just massive. And so that's where you kind of try to exceed those expectations from there. And it's easier to keep a customer, maintain a customer, than it is to recruit a new customer or to market to a new customer. So studies have shown that time and time again. But there's something that's in my gut that's starting to be a little more concerning for me as we talk about the internet and social media, is the influencer marketing. And the reason I say influencer marketing is because you read stories about people going to a restaurant being like, I'm an influencer and I'll post on your page if you give me a free meal or whatever it boils down to it. And I'm afraid that with as easy it is to complain, that people are now just complaining to try
100%.
to get free stuff. And I don't think it's hitting that critical mass yet, but it's something that I'm really truly passionate about and starting to watch.
Yeah. I think the lesson here is you have to really put time and effort into knowing what your audience is saying. You have to be able to respond with empathy. You've got to do the right thing. But at the end of the day, companies that do the right thing are being supported. I mean, we've seen studies showing that millennials and Gen Z, they only want to support companies that are doing the right thing when it comes to like social responsibility. And so I think that's what can set you apart. And when you are doing things the right way, when you are transparent, you have good customer service, you're actually listening to your audience, that's going to keep people coming back. And it's the same thing when you go to a restaurant. I would rather pay more to go to a restaurant where I know I'm going to have an experience and the staff is going to treat you incredibly well than go to a restaurant that, might be similar, might be a little bit cheaper, but you're just going to feel like a number. When you have that like hospitality angle to it, that just takes it to the next level. So keep that in mind. I know we have a lot of like entrepreneurs that listen to this podcast, and a lot of the people that do listen to this podcast are doing it great already, but just keep these in mind and figure out how you can learn and how you can adapt and maybe pick up some of these ideas of, what some of these other companies are doing successfully.
There's another great book. I'm gonna drop a lot of books today, called The Ultimate Question by Fred Reichheld, Reichheld. If you want to be on the podcast, please give us a drop. He has his own podcast, but he coined the Net Promoter Score, which, if you're not familiar with it, is the number of people who actively speak on your behalf of your company versus those detractors. There are some pluses and minuses in the long run with that, but it's a good book just to kind of get that basics of asking, how are you doing? And then doing something with that feedback. Asking your employees, how are you doing? And then getting feedback with that. And really, it does affect your bottom line. If your employees are happy, they're not leaving you. They're doing better customer service. You're not having to pay for training or recruiting.
You hit the nail. In addition, even if employers are not happy with something, if you have the majority of the things that meet their needs, they're going to be loyal to you. You may not have everything 100%, but if you have 75, 85% that meets their criteria, meets their needs as an employee, they're going to stick with you because they believe in you, because the majority is probably bigger than what the lesser is known. And you're doing whatever you can.
Yeah, good conversations at the from Thomas and Hattie, and we hope these insights were helpful for you as a listener. And if you have any other advice that you want to share, whether it's experiences, positives or negatives, hit us up. Drop comments below. Email us, text us. Let us know kind of your experience and that whole customer service angle. What has worked, what hasn't worked, and maybe tips that you would offer. We would definitely be interested in hearing your feedback, but we started the conversation with March Madness. And before we move on to our, Wednesday Wisdom segment, I want to get your picks for the Final Four. Who do you have in the Final Four, and who do you have winning the tournament? I'll go ahead and start off. I'm almost going all chalk. I've got Gonzaga, Alabama, Illinois, and Baylor in my Final Four. And then for the national championship, I'm going with a game that everyone wanted all season long that was canceled because of COVID-19. Baylor and Gonzaga in the national championship. And I'm going to be a homer, going to the Baylor Bears for the national championship. Hattie, who do you got?
I have a dream team. I wish TSU would go all the way. Just because they're an HBCU. I'm a big HBCU, and I'm a product of an HBCU. But I also like Michigan State. Always have.
They lost yesterday.
Of course.
That can't be your team.
In overtime.
Man, Gonzaga.
In overtime as well.
I like Gonzaga. Alabama can't have everything. But, and just because you go to Baylor, I'll root for them. And I may even, but again, Thomas, because he doesn't feel good about Texas Tech, they may surprise you. Some people do that.
I feel we can surprise people, but I feel that we are a solid Sweet 16 team. And that's when the competition starts getting really tough in the March Madness, because you're having to win over and over and over again. It's not like regular season where you play one or two hard games in a row and then you get a time to rest your players. It's real deal. My Final Four, I have Gonzaga, and then I have multiple brackets. One, I have Michigan, and then I have Alabama. So it's one of those two, a number 1, number 2 seed there. On the other side of the bracket, I have West Virginia actually knocking off Illinois. And the only reason I have that is because it goes back to you're having to play back to back to back. And yes, they're a Big Ten team, but they're going to be coming from either an Oklahoma State or another really solid competitor to turn around and play a different style of basketball against West Virginia in 2 days. And then on the other side, I have the Baylor Bears, because hands down, Baylor and Gonzaga are the teams to beat. Unfortunately, I do think that Gonzaga is probably going to pull it out against Baylor, only because I think their free throw shooting's a little bit better than Baylor.
Baylor's free throw shooting is terrible. I've talked about it all season long. I said that this reminds me of Memphis back in 2008 when they lost to Kansas. You can't shoot below 70% and win a national championship, so Baylor definitely has to step it up there. But I like your picks. And hopefully my Bears get 2 national championships, one on the men's side, one on the women's side. That would be amazing to watch. But Thomas, I do have your Texas Tech Red Raiders going to the Sweet 16 and facing Ohio State, and I think that'll be a pretty good game if it does happen. But it should be fun. Hopefully by the time you listen to this podcast, our picks are still valid, and hopefully none of these teams were upset over the weekend. That would be the ideal scenario. But that's what happens when you record on Friday and you release a podcast episode on Monday. So we'll see what happens. But guys, it's time for my favorite segment of the week. And, even though you're listening to this hopefully on Monday, we call it Wednesday Wisdom. And this is where we pick a random page in this book, this writing journal book, and we go through and we give our responses. And I actually had just opened this book, and I was going to give both Thomas and Hattie the opportunity to say like left and right, stop. But the page that I opened it on, ironically, was, what is your favorite me time ritual or routine? And I thought that was so appropriate based on what we had the conversations on about self-care, and Hattie's quote earlier this week about focusing on yourself before you can be kind, like be kind to yourself before you can be kind to others. So Hattie, I'm going to start off with you. What is your favorite me time ritual or routine?
Bubble baths.
I like it.
But with Epsom salt. I like Dr. Teal's. And it's really like an Epsom salt bath, especially after working out. And that, along with a glass of wine and a magazine, I'm all good.
I love it. Thomas, what about you? What is your favorite me time ritual or routine? I think I might know where it's going, and I think that it maybe has something to do with our guest on next week's episode of the podcast. Am I right in that assumption?
That is one of them. It's one of those things that I kind of float in and out of different me time things. Golf is one of them. If I can get out and play a round of golf, either by myself or with 2 or 3, 4 close friends, it is also fun. Sometimes opening a good book, whether it's a business book or whether it's another good book. Hattie, thank you for the recommendation of your book. I'm about halfway through with it right now. And then barbecuing is another one. It's really just time for me to self-reflect. It gives me the opportunity. Sometimes it's throwing on a good music album, sometimes acoustic, sometimes hard rock and roll, and just sitting there and enjoying the music and not having to worry about, okay, what time is it? Oh, do I need to do this? Do I need to do that? And it's just that time just to think. What's going on in my life? Is this good? Is this bad? What's going on with work? What's going on with family? And so it's something to keep me active because I fidget all day long. But at the same token, it's also time to slow down and to smell the roses, or for the upcoming podcast, to smell the barbecue.
Yeah, so quick teaser. On next week's episode of the podcast, Daniel Vaughn, who is the chief barbecue editor for Texas Monthly, is going to join us. This is an episode that we're really excited about. Specifically Thomas, he's definitely fanboying over this. And so we're really excited to have Daniel. But for me, for my favorite me time ritual or routine, kind of like Thomas, I think music is a huge part of it. And I've got, pretty solid speakers in my apartment that, I occasionally like to turn up and listen to. But for me, it's not listening over the speakers. It's putting headphones on, noise canceling headphones, and just turning up the volume, listening to music, closing my eyes, thinking, and there's just nothing better. Something that I used to do in college whenever I needed to think or reflect or something like that. I went to school in Central Texas, and there were a lot of like farm roads that you could drive down. And I would do that. I would just get in my car and drive. And, maybe drive for an hour and a half, 2 hours. And it was just so fun to, listen to music, maybe not even listen to music, and just drive and think. And it was so wonderful. Can't really do that in Houston because you don't want to get out and sit on traffic, in 610, I-45, 59. Probably not the ideal scenario, but I guess if you combine the two, one of my favorite things is kind of road trips, whether it's heading up to Waco for a football game, Dallas to go see family, just driving for a long period of time, listening to a podcast or listening to music. It's something that just kind of resets you and is super helpful.
I think you hit the nail on the head because I did remember when you said road trip, living in Central Texas in Austin, was just getting in the car, making the drive around either Lake Travis or just out to the east or to the north, and just stopping by those roadside attractions. Just, hey, fresh peaches. Let's stop and buy a thing of fresh peaches. Hey, barbecue. Let's go in and see if this barbecue joint's any good because I've had some that were not good doing that. But it's just that adventure of just let's see what happens. And sometimes I had friends. Sometimes it was just by myself. And to Austin's point, it's just that time to think and that time to reflect. I'm
not gonna lie, I do like being by myself. That's why I don't have a problem working remotely.
It's nice sometimes, to have that quiet time.
Absolutely.
You've got to definitely, it's that self-care that Hattie talked about. It's incredibly important. So if you haven't had self-care in a while, if you haven't had alone time in a while or me time, take time for yourself this week. Just set aside 30 minutes, an hour. Just do what makes you happy and use that time to recharge and reset. I think that it's going to be incredibly helpful for you as you get through the rest of the week. But we hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast, and hopefully you had some few nuggets that you could take away from this conversation. And as always, we want to thank our sponsors, Pierpont Communications and Mike Ranson & Co. For supporting this podcast and IABC Houston as well. And of course, we encourage you to follow us on all of our social media platforms. Just search @Biz Communicator. Feedback is always great, but it's preferred in a 5-star iTunes review. So if you can definitely leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, we'd appreciate that. And we also hope that you join us this Thursday as Hattie, Thomas, and I sit down with Chris Brogan on March 25th for a virtual webinar. I think it's going to be a lot of fun and should be a great conversation. So please sign up for that. And actually, how about this? If you are not an IABC member and you want to attend that session and not pay the $15, shoot us a text message. Send a text message and say type Chris Brogan. And that's CHRISBROGAN. Type Chris Brogan to 713-360-0133, and we'll go ahead and send you a link that you can join at no cost or no charge. So text Chris Brogan to 713-360-0133. But Thomas, Hattie, it's always great chatting with you. And before we fully close this out, any parting words or takeaways for this week?
Take care of yourself. Always. You can't take care of others if you don't take care of yourself.
Amen.
Amen to that. And, wreck 'em tech.
We'll sick 'em bears. And on that note, we hope that you enjoyed this episode of the podcast. And on behalf of my co-hosts this week, Hattie Horn and Thomas Bain, my name's Austin Staton. We'll catch you next time.
You've been listening to the Business Communicators. If you haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and leave us a 5-star review.